Madeleine Fournier with PopSugar, and I'm so excited to be here tonight to host the virtual launch event for King of Battle and Blood by Scarlett St. Clair. This is her new book. I found Scarlett's writing the same way I'm sure a lot of you did, through TikTok. As a social content producer and on our books committee at PopSugar, I specialize in making content for TikTok and Instagram, especially book talks and book roundups and reviews. So go check us out at PopSugar because Scarlett has actually made some exclusive content for us on our Instagram and TikTok. Now, Scarlett St. Clair herself is a citizen of the Muskogee Nation and the author of the Hades and Persephone saga, the Hades saga, King of Battle and Blood, and When Stars Come Out. She has a master's degree in library science and information studies and a bachelor in English writing. She is obsessed with Greek mythology, murder mysteries, and the afterlife. And I can vouch for this. If you are also obsessed with these things, and if you're here tonight, you probably are, then you're going to love this book. I just finished it and I'm obsessed with it. And if you purchase a copy with admission tonight, you'll get your signed Barnes & Noble exclusive copy in the mail, so check your mailbox in about 1 to 2 weeks. And without further ado, welcome Scarlett. Are you excited that King of Battle and Blood is out in the world tonight?
Yeah, I'm excited to be here, excited to be with you and have my readers here. And I'm so grateful to Barnes & Noble for hosting the event and really giving my books a chance from the very beginning, like from placing them on the shelf when I was self-published to like this beautiful special edition, which I hope everyone buys because it has a special chapter from Adrian's point of view, which is, you know, way more spicy and ruthless than Isolde. But yeah, it's the most surreal thing. I'm so ready. I'm like, as we all are, I think.
That's definitely for sure. So without further ado, let's talk about your book.
Yeah, I'm ready.
You are known and loved for your Hades and Persephone books. To start, I'd love to know a little bit more about this book and what pulled you from Greek mythology to talking about Adrian and Isolde's world of vampires and witches.
I think it was really two things. The first thing was that the characters were very loud and they would not stop talking. So I felt like I could write the book very fast, which is always promising for someone that, you know, works as fast as I do, writes books as fast as I do. But the second thing is that Malice got to a point where it's very heavy. As those books go along, they deal heavily with grief. And I am still grieving the loss of my father. It's been a year as of 2 days ago, which my readers know. And I was kind of ready to sort of take a break from the world where I had to channel my grief into this story, and I didn't have to do that in King of Battle and Blood. And so it was actually a really nice break, and I think it will make going back to New Greece even better, and my writing can be even stronger because I had the break.
Definitely. You said that you know, Adrian and Isolde sprang your head already fighting. You talked a little bit about that in our Instagram takeover, which for you guys, if you'd like to head over to our PopSugar takeover highlights to watch it. But I'd love to know, like, were there any other characters who had strong voices or ones that you particularly enjoyed writing? I personally, especially with Soren and Darok's dialogue together.
I love them too. They are another version of the sunshine one and the grumpy one.
Oh my gosh, it makes so much sense.
Yeah, they really are. And I love them in particular because they are also like, you know, they're an LGBTQ couple, and mostly everyone I feel like in this book really is, but I just love them from the very beginning. I really loved everyone. The only person who didn't talk to me as much was Anna Maria, and I think it's because she was very secretive. She's kind of hiding some things, and I think that as the story progresses, she will open up a little bit more. But mostly everyone had a very solid voice, and in particular, Soren he's kind of like that Hermes character where he's like really fun and but he can also be a badass, and I love those characters. So he's definitely one of my favorites.
Every time he appeared in a scene, I was just like, yes, like more of this beautiful
yeah. I wanted him to be in more, which is you know, but you're limited to Isolde's point of view in this book for reasons, and I think going forward in the series, we will have more points of view, which will be very fun.
I feel like that makes sense as to why like Anna's character is so secretive, because she's being secretive to Isolde's character. So like you not being able to hear her voice sort of makes sense, because Isolde can't really get to her and talk to her.
Yeah, it was the same kind of with Hades. Like he when I write from Persephone's point of view, I don't really know what he's doing. And like I'm writing a game of retribution right now, and I'm like, so that's what you were doing. It's interesting.
Yeah, I know that deep research is your thing since you were a former librarian. I'd love to know sort of what intrigues you so much about the mythology and legends that you reshape and recast in your novels. In your author's note, at the end of this book, you sort of mentioned the different places you pull vampire lore from, and that's so fascinating to me.
Yeah, I just kind of go down really deep dives for information, and I think a lot of people, when they think about vampires, they immediately go to Dracula without really thinking that Dracula is sort of an adaptation of vampiric mythology. So we kind of have to look a little bit deeper than that. And I found this book, it's the Encyclopedia of Vampiric Mythology. And I was like, oh my God, this exists. Like, what is this? And the author, she had a foreword, and she talked about how vampires were just a representation of cultural fears. And I was like, it makes so much sense, because we have so many different versions of vampires. And so when I built this world, I thought, okay, well, what is their greatest fear? So what would the vampires actually look like? But I love mythology, because it does come from our culture, right? The Greeks also did this. They created gods for literally everything to explain everything that went on around their world. And the gods, I feel, acted just as humanity acts. They were no greater than a human was, except they had great powers, and they did really terrible things with those powers. And we just don't change as a society. And I think that mythology illustrates that. And so I'm very interested in kind of looking at how we don't change and kind of folding that into these stories.
Did you pull any of your knowledge of mythology into writing King of Battle and Blood? Like, did that knowledge help you when shifting the focus to vampires?
I always have, in particular, I created goddesses in this world, and we always have a foundation, some foundational goddesses, a goddess for life, or a god of life and one of death, and that was definitely part of my mindset. And in the culture, of course, they come to push death aside and not worship that goddess as much. She becomes feared. And so definitely when I was creating sort of the religious thought process around the book, that came into play. I think all my books have some element of some sort of like god, or some sort of mythology based around life and death. I'm very interested in death, as we've established.
Definitely, especially since like vampires are sort of like a representation of like undeath, or like
the undead.
I think it's really interesting that both like Adrian can live forever and Isolde is a human, and like that war between both of them, both like metaphorically and physically.
Yeah.
So kind of on that note, your books are always pretty unapologetically sexy. And I really love that about your writing. I know that the last time we spoke, I mentioned that I loved that Isolde, especially in this book, always like wanted and had desires, even if she like thought that she couldn't because of like pressures of like society. It was never, I don't want to have sex. She always had the agency. I'd love to sort of talk about how those like passages really propel the storyline, and how intense passion, especially on Isolde's side, guides her journey in King of Battle and Blood.
I was really thinking about this hard, because I talk a lot about the society pressure in our world for women to be both sexual and pious. And I wanted to create a character who was very comfortable with her sexuality and very sex positive. And that's Isolde. She definitely, I think it's a greater representation of how she views the world. She's not going to let anyone say no. And even when she's faced with a vampire king, for her, it's like, okay, well, this is about like, what can I take from this physically? Like, what can I take pleasure from this? And I do think she fights with that on a greater level, on a more like, internal level. But at the same time, she's not going to deny herself. And a lot of times women are taught to deny themselves in our society, and she doesn't do that. I think oftentimes we have this thing in romance where people like to say that romance doesn't have plot, but it does. It just looks different. Plot is just pot. I'm sorry. Plot is just a series of actions, and sex in a romance, sex is part of those actions. We take these steps to, learn more about ourselves, to move a plot forward, right? And that's the same case with romance. And Isolde is no different. So I used sex to develop her character arc. I think it sort of helps her establish her identity going into the vampire world, but it also helps her identify like what her relationship with Adrian is going to look like. And right in the beginning, right, it's like it's just a bunch of hate sex, but we get to a point where we can't keep having hate sex. We actually have feelings for each other, and you can illustrate that through sex scenes. And you can also show her ability to take control and have power through sex, and that's very important to me with all of my characters. I don't want sex to be demeaning in books. I think it's demeaning enough in society. So I always look for ways to have it empower the females in the book.
Yeah, and I love that like she was very powerful regarding sex, like outside of the bedroom, so to speak. Like anytime a character tried to belittle her for wanting or having sex, like overhearing her or just knowing that she had sex, anytime like they tried to demean her or talk down to her, like she had something to say or do. Mostly she was very assertive, and I loved that about her, that she was like, you can say whatever you want about me personally, but you can't talk about like the way that I have sex. And like I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, she really does. And I just, yeah, she really stands up for that side of herself. And I think it's so important because a lot of times we're taught to be shameful. And she's like, I'm not going to be ashamed of that. Like I am fully going to embrace the fact that this is happening. And even like the vampire court too is very sexual. I felt like the court would be very open with sexuality and sex. And it doesn't really faze her. She's just like, this is cool. Like, it's fine, because she lives in a world she's created where this is okay. I'm comfortable with this.
Yeah, I think there was like a scene where somebody was like, oh, like you are okay with this? And she's like, yeah, like I don't see anything wrong with this.
Yeah.
Which
normalizing sex positivity is like 100% a goal.
and especially like I know that King of Battle and Blood is sort of about like choosing your own story. You mentioned in your author's note, like it's sort of choosing what's best for you, no matter the opinion of others. So I loved that like she was always like, I will do what I want, regardless of what her family or her citizens thought of her. I know that this book's sort of about finding your own identity. And A Touch of Ruin also was pretty emotionally personal. And I really want to know how much of your writing is a mirror of, the real Scarlett St. Clair.
I read this question and I laughed so hard.
Yeah.
Question. And I talk about it a lot because my books are completely a reflection of how I have come to embrace who I feel I really am. And you can see the progression through all of my books, starting with Persephone. I'm very protective of Persephone because her journey is my journey. And I've seen the feedback, right, from people who are like, she's so annoying. And I'm like, okay, well, you were a 24-year-old once, and maybe you weren't sheltered by your parents, and maybe you didn't get anxiety when you asked them if you could do something, but I did. And so her journey is exactly what I had to do, escape this very confining world this very sheltered world, and learn who I was. And it takes a lot to strip off the layers of, the expectations that society and your parents have placed upon you, so you can actually do what you want. And so Persephone is the journey to sort of becoming who Isolde is. Isolde is who I aspire to be. And I'm not quite sure I'm there yet, but I will be by the time I finish Chaos, because Persephone is sort of the character that I work through all of my trauma with. And I love her for that. And people will ask me all the time to like choose between them. And I'm like, I cannot. And because it's impossible when you put so much of your life and so much of yourself into that person. But that quote you use, it's very important to me. It's very much anytime I go to make a decision and I feel any hesitancy around it, what will people think? I think, well, it doesn't matter. It's about my life and my choices, and no one else lives my life except for me. So I try to fold those lessons into all of my books. So it's definitely all the choices I've made to become who I am today.
For sure. I think that everybody sort of grapples with that, like, what will people think of me?
Yeah.
I never really thought about like sort of stopping and like sitting back and being like, what do I want to do? That's such like a refreshing perspective. I especially loved reading, I mean, how Isolde sort of takes quite a literal like reins of her life, and sort of stops asking what will people think of me. And it's again so refreshing to see, especially since I feel like a lot of like romance novels, I love reading them, but sometimes it's like women will just sort of sit back and let like a man sweep her off her feet. It's really nice to read those, but sometimes it's just really empowering to read like a woman just being like, no, I'm going to take charge of my life. And I'm
well, some of us don't have the luxury to not take charge, and I think that's sort of Isolde's situation, right? She's born into a world where she doesn't have the luxury to wait for that, and she's actually not given much of a choice. Like, she's given a set of circumstances, and she's like, well, I'm gonna make all the decisions that will be best for me, and she does a really great job, I think, personally.
I think so too. I was really excited to see how everything turned out. Is Isolde like the person that you relate to most in this book, or was there someone that you were writing like, I relate to Isolde, but like this other character is just like one that you share a bond with?
I feel like Isolde is probably the closest. I think parts of myself are in all the characters, but Isolde comes through like Isolde is just someone I aspire to be. She's someone who, she has parts of me. Like, I have no filter at all. I will tell you exactly what I think about everything in the world if you give me the time. So I'm very direct, and so I have that characteristic. But the way that she saw her identity changing, the way that she recognized that this dream that I had is going to have to change the way I thought of it. Like, I think we all do that, where we're like, we have these hopes and dreams, and then we have to change. And I'm just now realizing this is exactly what my life has been. I've always wanted to be a writer. I've always wanted to be a full-time author. And it did not unfold the way I expected, the way I had dreamed, but it's perfect the way it happened. And that's Isolde's situation too. She became queen, but not in the way that she expected. So she had to modify her thought process. So she definitely embodies like what I've experienced. And she's the closest one that I would say I relate to.
Definitely. That makes so much sense. Now I would really like to take some time to answer some questions that came in from our attendees. Are you okay with that?
I am. Bring them.
The first question, I'm sure you know that this one's coming. Everybody wants to know how many books will be in the series.
3 right now.
Amazing.
I'm very much like someone who has to write the book, but 3 are planned.
I got to the end, like, there's no spoilers, but like it ended on a slight cliffhanger, and I was like disappointed, but I was like, okay, there's more coming, but I want to know what happens now.
It's nothing like the mouse cliffhanger, so no one has to fret.
It's not like a huge, it's just like I knew that there was more coming, and I was like,
right,
I want more of it. I feel like cliffhanger is a strong word. The central plot gets like wrapped up, but then
yes,
some loose things. I was like, man,
it ends with a oh God, like, what does that mean?
You slipped a couple things in the last couple pages where I was like, oh, okay, so now there's more coming. I want to know now, but there's 2 pages left.
Right, I know. We'll get there eventually.
From Larissa S. in New Jersey, she asks, and this is one of my favorite questions, how can I survive marriage to a vampire king? What are your tips as an expert?
I love that I'm an expert. Well, you should have a knife at all times because we know his old is very stabby. That would be helpful. You should be willing to, you should be willing to bite back. And yeah, I think the vampire court is very brutal and they can make you question. They're very gaslighty. So I think you always have to know who you are at the core of it. So always remember who you are and you'll survive. Good luck.
Everybody loves the keep a knife on you.
I mean, it's a great, as unfortunately as women, we have to say, find a way to stay armed, maybe there will come a time when we don't, but can't hurt to carry a knife.
Yeah, I definitely feel that. Amy L. from New York asks, what is your writing process like? What qualities in a protagonist most resonate with you when writing or even reading anything?
Sorry, I have a bit of a cold. So my writing process is very chaotic. It does start with just hearing voices, and I write down all of those scenes. And then at some point, I put them in chronological order, and then I just edit that. Qualities that resonate with me, I think it's just, I don't know that it's kind of strange because I put a lot of myself into the novels, but I don't know that I do that so intentionally. And I think that that's what attracts me to protagonists is can I relate to their plight? And I usually, it's weird to say because I write the characters and I relate to them so heavily, but yeah, so is it something that I have experienced that I can talk about and that I can fold my actual lived and raw emotion into? Because I'm really big on feeling. So I think I kind of just look for that, and I think that my goal is to always, if in the beginning the character is not as strong, we're going to get there. We're creating a character arc that will illustrate this person gaining power and embracing their power and becoming very strong. So those are kind of things is there the potential for that?
Definitely. I love that answer. Fabiola B from Arizona asks, is there a character you are especially excited to introduce or enjoyed even more to write about? I know we talked about Soren, but
I do love Soren. I love Soren. I wrote a bonus scene for Soren and Derek in the hardcover, and it was from Derek's point of view, and I really enjoyed his point of view. I think I like tortured souls. So he's definitely, for all his years, he still questions is he good at this relationship thing? And so I'm excited to get into that. Yeah, right. It's we will never be we will always be the same.
I was reading through and I was like, I don't think he smiles once in this book.
He probably doesn't.
Soren stops smiling through the book. So it's sort of like a perfect, one always talking, strong but silent. It's such a good balance.
I think they will be a favorite. I definitely worry that Soren would be too much like Hermes, which is another favorite character in A Touch of Darkness. But I love to make people laugh, and I think I'm hilarious. So I always have to have some hilarious comic relief character, someone who keeps it light, and and so Soren is one of my favorites, and I think people will love them. So.
Yeah, I mean, especially with how heavy some of the themes are in A Touch of Darkness, you kind of need that not Touch of Darkness. I mean, for both A Touch of Darkness and Battle and Blood, you sort of need there's a few character relief moments, and I especially loved Soren. Oh gosh, Grace T from Tennessee asks, what helped your creative process when writing this story? I know that you were writing during a pandemic, so
KBB I wrote in 2 months. So do not recommend. Although I'm going to have to do the same with the Game of Retribution. But the best part, I need a soundboard anytime I'm writing. I need someone to just talk to. They don't even have to respond. I just need them to listen to me talk. And that's how I got through it so quickly. I knew how the book was going to end. If I know my end point, I can work toward it. But definitely had to talk through a lot because I had to write it so quickly. Normally I would just suffer. Like in a week I'd figure it out, but I didn't have the time to do that. And luckily my editor was like, yes, call me. So I did it.
Yeah. Actually, there's this one question in the chat that I love. Ashley asks, is there anything you have to do to clear your mind before you write? Or like, do you just like just sit down and you're like, I'm going to start writing?
I should probably. Today I did sage my space, which helps too, because it's just like, it's sort of a ritual, and then you can breathe. I don't know, I can breathe better. So that really helps. But no, I mean, what I try to do if I'm doing really good is I think about what I'm going to write the night before, and I go through it in my head. And so when I wake up the next day, I'm like, I'm ready to go. So if I can do that, I will be on a good path.
That is really smart.
I am chaos though. Let's just be clear.
I would like go to bed and be like, I know what I'm going to write. And wake up the next morning and be like, I've lost it.
Okay, well, I do that with like ideas. If I have an idea and I'm like, oh, it's a great idea, and I don't write it down, it's gone. But not with like, if I know where the story is going and I just run through it quickly in my head, I'm like, this point, this point, this point, then I can do it.
That makes sense. And Oshra M in New York asks, how do you choose how your characters will look? Which I love that question.
They just kind of come fully formed. Like they just kind of tell me what they look like. And like I knew from the very beginning, there's a big deal about Adrian being blonde. And I'm like, what things you don't expect. He was just blonde from the beginning. I don't know, y'all. Just he was. And then Isolde, because she represented so much of an identity that I have as Muskogee Creek Nation, I wanted her to, I present white, obviously, and I've had a lot of white experiences, more than I have had Native experiences. But I wanted her to have the opposite. I wanted her to be a brown girl who, you know, felt disconnected from her mother's culture, and because I can relate to that element. And so that's kind of where I came from. And I wanted her to be mid-size because I'm mid-size, and you get a lot of, right now we're getting a lot of like skinny or like plus size characters. And I'm like, well, I am in the middle. And so it was really fun writing that. And my favorite part of the book is when her I'm blanking on the names. Her like made comments on like she ate too much bread because her boobs are getting bigger because she gains weight. She's gaining weight, and I always gain weight, and I can always tell I'm gaining weight when my boobs get bigger. So that's like a personal thing that I included in the book, and I just think it's hilarious. But yeah, so
I did like that she, you know, she's mid-sized, but like she still like there was no comment on like, oh, like the dresses that you get to wear. Like she's still like, there's no commentary on like her weight aside from just like, you look incredible in these outfits, these beautiful prints.
Right.
It's
so interesting because like people, I am someone, I'm obviously someone who's mid-sized. I'm very strong though. I have a lot of muscle. I work out every day, like, you know, and I look good in my clothes. And we need to tell people that, like, of all sizes and that's a societal thing. But I love that, and I hope more of that happens in books. You know, it's not. And the maid character who does comment, she kind of represented like my mom would always do that. My mom would always be the one who would comment on my weight. Yeah. So I was like, I'm gonna throw this in here because I relate, but it's like whatever. Like you can, you know, like fuck off. Like I'm gonna keep eating bread.
Right. I think Isolde's only commentary on like her dresses and outfits is like, I just need more room to like be able to run and store knives.
Yeah.
And that's my
Yes.
biggest issue with my outfits is where can I fit weapons? What a problem to have.
I love her. I love her so much.
She's so fun. I actually want to know, this is something I was wondering, if you ever, if the King of Battle and Blood was ever turned into a movie, do you have like a fan cast of like who you would want to play Adrian and Isolde?
I have no clue. So if anyone has like people to send me, please do. You know what? I've never pictured it as live action. I've always pictured it as like like an anime, and because I love anime. And so I've always pictured it as something like the same with my first book, When Stars Come Out. I never pictured that live, like as live action. It's always been like an anime in my head. A Touch of Darkness is the only series I've ever pictured as a live action movie, like your TV series. So, so I don't. Do you have any idea? Do you know?
I don't, because now I just want like anime Adrian. I just want to see his like flowy blonde hair and like anime like dramatic look. I can picture it now.
Like long hair, and people like are always, they ask me and Laura Thalassa all the time, like, why are all your male characters, why do they have long hair? And I'm like, I love long hair. Like, what is the deal?
Right? Like, have you ever watched like a beautiful long-haired anime man with like the beautiful tresses?
I think that's actually where it comes from, my obsession, because I think anime people are gorgeous. Like, I love Final Fantasy so much. And actually, Sephiroth is like one of my inspirations. Like, when I think of Adrian, I sort of think of Sephiroth. And like, even though he has like silvery hair, I'm still like, and he's like he's a bad guy, and he's, you know, really hot. So as an anime character, oh my God, we went like off a cliff.
Oh my God. All right. I'm gonna steer back with Diana G's question from Nevada. She asks, what's the most exciting thing you learned about yourself while writing these books, I guess, aside from loving anime?
I know. I learned I could write a book in 2 months under extreme pressure. And while I said I never wanted to do it again, I think it's sort of my life from now on. I don't know. I think what I learned is, aside from all the stuff I talked about with myself, is just like how far I've actually come. Because I was thinking about this today, just the excitement around this book. Like, I checked my Instagram and I had 3,000 followers this time last year. And I have 36.1K. And so 33,000 of you have come along since then. And I would have never imagined that I would have been here this time last year. And I think that's like that's the most thing, like, that's what I've learned, is that, I mean, look how far I have come. Like, look how much has happened. Look how many people who have become involved in like lifting this book up. Like, that blows my mind. The buzz around this book is something that I could have never imagined. Like, I would have been happy with half of this. I would have expected half of this. So that is incredible. That is, it's surreal. I had a moment today. Yeah, I had a moment. I was like, you mean to tell me like 33,000 people found your work in the last year? That blows my mind. Probably more people who don't have social media.
Yeah,
blows my mind.
Book Talk is incredible. It works so fast. And speaking of like places to get books, I'm going to dive into another question from Erica R. in Massachusetts, who is also a public librarian. She says that she knows that you are a librarian. How has your experience in libraries impacted or led to being a writer? What made you decide or allowed you to shift into being a full-time writer? Everybody wants to know how you started becoming a writer.
Yeah, well, I actually, my wish to be a writer influenced my decision to become a librarian. So I am a Gates Millennium alumni. I received a full scholarship to go to school for 10 years. I used 6 of those years because I didn't really want to go into a doctorate, can't talk, in library science. So I got my master's in library science because I thought you'll be around books, you'll understand readers. And man, it really does help you understand readers, because at the end of the day, they're going to read what their friends are reading. So thank you all who, spread my book to your friends through word of mouth. It's like the best form of marketing. But as far as choosing to become full-time, it was honestly like when I made more money than I was making as a librarian. And it kind of just happened one month. I kind of just started to look at what I was making as an author, and I thought, you can quit. And it was very scary because not only because that's a huge leap, but I love my library system. I love my coworkers, and I was on the path to becoming a branch manager at my favorite library, the only one I've worked at, it's the South Oklahoma City Library. It's a beautiful location. I was very established, still am established in the community. It was such a hard decision to make. But at the end of the day, this had been my dream since I was 13. And it did not mean that I couldn't still support the library just because I left. And in fact, I'm going back for their board meeting in January, so I'm still heavily involved in the library. And I still, I donate to them, and I want to support them in any way I can. I always will, and I will never not be a librarian. It was a very hard decision to make, but at the end of the day, this is my ultimate dream. I've wanted to do this since I was 13.
I completely feel on that. And I have such a soft spot for librarians and libraries. It's like where I always tell people, like, I grew up basically in my town's small branch of like our local library.
I love it.
A librarian, because their jobs are really hard, everybody.
Yeah. Yep. I have so many stories, but yes, they're very hard.
Shiana B in Washington State wants to know, do you have a really productive writing spot? She says for her, it's Starbucks, even when it's loud, which I love.
I wish. I used to go to this coffee shop. It's not a Starbucks. I used to go to this coffee shop that I kind of lived close to, and I could always sort of focus there. But when the pandemic started, I had to work from home. And so I tried to just move around to my house as much as possible. And now I'm trying to get back into going to a location. The problem is I don't like leaving my dog alone. So I feel really guilty. So I haven't quite found that location again. What I have used mostly is my bed, which I don't recommend because it hurts my back, but it's a place that I feel relatively productive on.
It's really comfy, and then you don't have to get out of bed to do work. So
I know I sound so lazy, but it works.
I am going to segue into from bed to my favorite trope. There was only one bed. Isabel C from New Jersey asks what your favorite romantic book trope is, or if you have one that you would recommend. I also recommend fake dating trope. I love that one.
Oh, yeah, I do. Obviously, I love arranged marriages like that. I've always wanted to write an arranged marriage book, and I did. So yay me. But I do love the only one bed trope, and I love like the one horse trope because I did it. And
it's the same flavor, just like different sort of way to do it.
Yeah, yes. And of course, enemies to I will always write enemies to lovers, I think. I was trying to think, like, would you ever write anything other than enemies to lovers? And I'm like, I don't know. It's just so fun to like hate each other and then love each other.
I definitely prefer enemies to lovers to friends to lovers. Like friends to lovers, I'm like, oh, that's adorable. But like enemies to lovers, you just get
you got to work for it.
It's whatever character realizes that in their like hate and love are so intertwined with passion. And it's like, I love when like one character like reveals instantly, like they're like, oh no, I don't hate them. I have jumped from friends to love immediately. It's just like,
I know. There's just something about it that is like so satisfying. And it's like it probably doesn't happen in real life, but like that's not the point. This is escapism, right? It's what I want to see in my romance novels.
I don't think I'd want like a real enemies to lovers like
No.
romance. So much work.
No.
Getting to sit down and read it in a book, I'm like, yes, absolutely. I love the
That is so much work. It's so true.
You would have to find someone who's like as witty as you think you are in your head, kind of thing. But nobody's as witty as they are in their head. So it's so
I know. I think I'm hilarious, and I know. Like no one else thinks I am as funny as I think I am. So you know, whatever.
I think we have time for a few more questions. So somebody wants to know, will this new series be like the Persephone and Hades series with the split perspectives in each book? Or are you just going to keep it with Isolde's perspective?
Oh, do you mean that will I write another series from their point of view, like from Adrian's point of view? No.
That's fair.
I will not do that. But I think that the subsequent books will have more points of view. And not just Adrian's.
Ooh, I'm excited.
If someone's asking me why I won't write from Adrian's point of view, it just doesn't fit the story. It's just like with Hades, like I knew he was doing other things. With Adrian, like it would be boring. Yeah. So
he just sits in the room and like eats saltine crackers when he's not with Isolde.
Yeah, I really do think like his main goal in this first book was to like ensure that she was like 110% invested in him and his goal, you know. So
that's fair. Somebody wants to know, what is the craziest thing you have in your search history that you've needed to research for your writing?
Wait, what is the craziest thing I have in my search history?
Yeah, is there something like wild that you had to look up and you're like, oh gosh?
This wasn't for these books, but for my first book, When Stars Come Out, I had to know what an autopsy looked like, and so I had to Google public autopsies, which is the most uncomfortable thing that you could ever imagine. And it's not like listening to true crime. It's because it's just not. It's different.
It's boring. It's a little more squeamish.
Yeah, I hated it, but I did it, so whatever. It's done now. Just thinking about it, I'm like, oh god, that was the worst thing I've ever done in my life.
Like, I did this for you guys, but
yeah, I hated it.
Well, on to vampires, something that you do like talking about. Are there other authors, vampire stories, or books that you related to while writing this book? I feel like a lot of people, when they think of vampire stories, they think of Twilight, but do you have any other?
Oh, I think the only actual vampire, I read Twilight in high school, but the only actual vampire books that I have read are by Janine Frost, and she wrote, and I read them when I was a librarian, and she wrote One Foot in the Grave, and I was really interested in it because it's her version of like if Buffy chose Spike, which is like my ultimate dream. And you don't have Joss Whedon involved, so that's a bonus. So they're very good, and if you would like, there's not the Night Huntress series, and then there's a companion series, and I love them both. And so those are the vampire books that I have read, and I haven't read anything else. So I'm not a very good reader anymore. I used to be when I didn't have to write so much, but now I'm just like, don't have time.
That makes sense. You wrote a book in 2 months. There's not a lot of time to read in that time.
Yeah, you just go for it.
So you actually mentioned in our TikTok, which again, if you want to check out our TikTok, head to PopSugar and you can find Scarlett St. Clair's exclusive content. But you mentioned that you came up with Adrian and Isolde's names, but there's like a super expansive world with a map in King of Battle and Blood. Is there I just want to know like how you came up with the setting around these two characters. There's so many expensive names. Like, did you have a specific way that you named these places?
Well, if you kind of look at the map, you can it started out resembling the landmass of Romania, because I needed a foundation to start with, and of course I'm going to use Romania, and I kind of wanted everything to sort of sound Romanian or Slavic, just because that's what we're familiar with when it comes to vampiric mythology, so it made sense for me to sort of go down that path. But other than that, I don't really know. I just knew that they were going to, in my brain, like my brain was like, there are 9 houses. And I was like, okay, 9 houses, that's the foundation. Why? And so I just kind of went with that line of thinking. And my brain works very straight. Like I just hear the things and then I do it. And so the 9 houses, it was like there are 9 houses and they're being overrun by this place called Rebecca. And I was like, all right, we got it. We're going. It's not that cool. Like I wish I could give a better answer. I sound insane. But yeah, so I just kind of did that and I come up with the names. Like I don't know why, but I wanted all the houses, the 9 houses, to have 4-letter names. And so that's why they're all 4 letters. And yeah, it works out pretty well, I think. Maybe. I don't know.
I didn't even notice that. That's so interesting.
Yeah, I thought, well, if they're all kind of united, they would probably all be very similar. And then it was interesting thinking outside of the 9 houses, because when it came to like the atoll of Nalini, I wanted that to be more like Islander, like, Pacific Islander feel. And I felt like we have to move beyond just this idea that everyone's kind of Romanian and Slavic, or like have that sort of feel. We would have more diverse cultures in the book. So it's going to be interesting to explore more of that, because we're very honed in on, just kind of Rebecca and what that looks like. But if you if you read, you can tell like it was based off of like how Romanians like built their houses too, and the progression. You can kind of see the progression of how they built their houses, because you can tell, and this is so cheesy in the book, like which houses are older and which ones are newer based on how they were built. Romanian. Yeah, anyways, it was a big hole of research.
I like the tie-in of like Romania and vampire. It's like so subtle, but like it works with the story really well.
Yeah, I feel like you have to come at it from some kind of familiarity. Like if you're going to create a fantasy world, you have to read it in something that's familiar. And we're all familiar with Vlad the Impaler, right? And
yes,
honestly, like Vlad's, pursuit of like to conquer, the kingdoms, he was just kind of like a morally gray character. Like from his point of view, he was doing what was right. That's Adrian's too. So
I think we have time for one more question, and I really like this question. Do you have a playlist to listen to, or ones that readers should listen to while reading King of Battle and Blood?
yeah, I love my KBB playlist. It's on my Spotify, which there's a link in my bio on my Instagram if you guys want to check it out. But I listen to my playlists on repeat when I write, and KBB was no exception. So definitely check that playlist out.
Did you have one song that you were specifically like, this is Adrian Isolde?
I think it's called The Wolf, or it has wolf in the title at least. And that one definitely represents their relationship pretty well.
I'll have to go and listen to it immediately.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, I just want to let everyone know that we have a ton of special Scarlett St. and King of Battle and Blood content over at PopSugar, including an exclusive, totally not in the book scene, told from Adrian's perspective, which I loved reading. And as I mentioned before, special content of Scarlett talking more about this book on our Instagram takeover highlight and on our TikTok. And thank you so much for being here, Scarlett, to talk about your new book.
Thank you. And thank you to Barnes & Noble for hosting us. I'm so appreciative. So
yes, thank you so much. And have a great night, everybody. I hope you enjoy reading King of Battle and Blood. It's out tonight, tomorrow, depending on shipping.
I know. Oh my goodness.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.